Get ready to listen, learn, and earn CE hours. This podcast features content from an accredited CE activity provided by Colibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits.
Yeah, I think the curiosity is so important. I think in order to be successful in anything, you have to have a level of curiosity. So you need to be curious in perspectives, understanding biases, really getting to that trust and building that credibility. But if you're not curious and you just walk in and out of a situation, there's no improvement going on. There's no, you're not growing at any level. So the curiosity piece is really important to your personal and your professional success.
Welcome to part 2 of our podcast series, Building Your Own Credibility on and Off the Team. Joining us again are Kathy Scott and Bridget Sirikis, co-authors of Stupid Gone Viral. Welcome back, ladies.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
I'm Leanna McGuire, your host for this series, and today we're talking about trust, how trust contributes to your credibility on and off the team. So let's start off by talking about what does trust need? What do you need in order to gain trust?
Ooh, you need a lot more than what people are getting today. It sounds like we have a workforce that's really hurting and not trusting those above them or even a lot of their colleagues because of the polarization we have experienced over the last few years. So, it's going to take some different ways of behaving and relating to get trust back into the workplace. And one of those is just humility as a leader or a coworker. It's coming forward as someone who wants to understand the situation and others in the situation and admitting I don't have all the answers. We need to work together. It's a humility that's really important.
Yeah, and I think today, especially as Kathy was mentioning, that is so important. I mean, when leaders come in, your one-ups come in and they think that they know everything, it can be so off-putting to so many because people really want to relate. They want to find something meaningful in their work. And they're looking to their supervisors and others to help them, gain a little bit of that clarity. So I think that that's so important. And in building trust, you really have to go there. You can't be the one that comes in saying, hey, I got all the answers. Just do what I tell you. Nobody wants that these days.
Plus, nobody believes it.
Right.
I mean, who has all the answers?
Not in that complex day. There's just
no way. No,
it.
No.
Yeah.
It just screams my way or the highway. Basically,
but Bridget reminded me of this story. And we talked a little bit in the last one about supplies and supply management and working with clinicians and being a former chief nursing officer for many, many years. I remember this one scenario where they changed all the gloves out in the organization and they didn't really get feedback from the nurses or the physicians, but these were the everyday gloves, not the sterile. And I kept hearing complaints from nurses and I kept trying to ignore that and think, come on, these are significantly cheaper. So one day I finally went out and rounded. And which I did routinely, but I was out rounding and the nurses see me and they're like all over the gloves, like hate these gloves. And I'm like, look, you guys, like what can be so bad? And they flip them on and fingers went right through the end of the gloves. They were so thin. And they said, we're using 3 times as many gloves because they're so crappy. That wasn't really their words, but close enough. And I immediately got it and I had to apologize and and say, wow, didn't know that. I heard you, but I didn't really hear you. And we got to go back and look at this. And we did. But that's just, I wanted to defend the decision, but at the same time, you couldn't. And so we ended up going through a process where we involved the people who wore the gloves. And that's crazy.
There's a thought.
And we came up with a different solution.
What a great example.
That's so great. Yeah. Well, there's always one in hospitals. They love to do this because people, when they try to cut costs, they always love to cut the ply and the toilet paper. There's nothing worse in this world than to cut the ply and the toilet paper, right? I mean, you can find efficiencies elsewhere, but just got to add a little levity
we
here.
did that during the pandemic.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, we had to do that during the pandemic at our house. Not a big hit, but
right, exactly.
Wow. Okay, both good examples. No, that really is, that's key, is to really listen and not just defend your position for the sake of defending the position. You know what I mean? I guess that's what we're talking about by humility, is just, admitting.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Does empathy play a part in this?
Oh, yes. Empathy is, a lot of people think of empathy as sympathy. It is not. I want to be clear. And empathy is really connecting to that feeling below the surface and understanding the situation that they're in, that they're experiencing. It might be different for you, but they truly are experiencing something in a certain way. And when you're able to do that, which, in the glove story, I was pretty able to get there pretty fast, having been a bedside nurse for a long time. But how frustrating that would be, and how senseless that would seem, and how angry they were getting about that. I mean, it didn't take, too much emotional competence to pick up on that. But empathy is really important, and it's important for us to think about intentionally being empathetic. That we call that cognitive empathy, but it's saying, I'm really going to try to get into your experience and understand it. Very important.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of rounding too, because that's so helpful. You can walk in their shoes for a moment, for 30 minutes, for an hour, and it can completely change your perspective, which is really helpful. I mean, you quite often get caught up in the busyness of the day to just step out and partner with them, or, take that step back and go back to when you were in those front lines and did that. It really, it's humbling, and it also allows you to project that empathy, which I think is so important. And they, your team, they love that. They relate to that. They respond to that.
Absolutely. So empathy really is, again, separate from sympathy, is I can relate to this situation from an experience that I've had in the past, or at least I can try and put myself in your position if I haven't experienced it myself, right? So
yeah, it's also, you are correct, but it's also knowing that you're going to experience things differently than me. So just the fact, I'm going to say that I'm a white female who's been in the profession for a long time, and I'm in a position of power, quote unquote, as a leader. I'm going to experience people and situations very differently than you. I mean, how many times have you watched someone interact? I always pay attention to how people treat my assistant when they come in the office. And if they are disrespectful there, like, wow. And then they come in to see me and they're a whole different person. That's what I'm talking about. So that cognitive empathy is recognizing that we are different people and in different roles and have different experiences. And I need to pay attention to yours. I need to hear what you're saying to me about your experience and understand that better. It's very different.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This ties in a little bit to the humility, a lot to the humility piece as well. Because if you're being humble, it creates trust, which, right? Am I right? I'm thinking of it. I'll give you an example of, I had a leader several years ago who lost his temper. It was just a really bad day. And my simple question was the straw, right? That he was at the end of his rope and lost his temper. So, somebody gave me the example of a credibility piggy bank. So coins either go in or come out. And I took a whole bunch out because I thought, I had this guy's I can't work here. I had the whole night shift was that. And the next morning he came in and said, I didn't handle that situation very well last night. And he explained why and said, can we start over? And that the trust and the credibility, but that level of humility created a level of trust in me where I thought, okay, I can trust this guy to do the right thing if he loses it, right? So I don't know. I was just trying to tie the two together, but I think that's a pretty good example too.
Wow, I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
It
Being
was
willing
great.
to say, I was an idiot, or I behaved badly, or, and to apologize and
Huge.
and work on, and then bring it back to, let's try this again. I like that. It's one thing, there's some people, they could apologize and keep doing it. But the fact was, we are all human and we will all do dumb things. And so to be able to apologize and then correct the situation, or try to correct the situation, is a great example of humility.
Right. And credibility.
Yeah, I think it's that as you mentioned, Kathy, that human aspect, which is so important. Sometimes we forget that we're all humans. We're not widgets, and we'll mess up.
Yeah,
but it's important to own it when we do mess up, and show that empathy that you just talked about.
And asking questions, right? Like you with the glove example, like really getting in there and finding out what the issue is, instead of just, like, I don't want to hear this. That's a really big piece of this, isn't it?
It is. And again, it took me too long on that one, but to ask questions that are not yes, no questions. Do you like the gloves? No.
Good point. Yeah. Right.
So you want to ask open-ended questions that help you have a better understanding of the situation. And when you ask those kinds of questions, there's more energy and people want to talk to you about it, which is always good. So, questions like, what happens when, people different, because they were one size fits all. But is this happening with everyone? Tell me more about when this has happened to you. So ask with curiosity and to get more information and get people to share their stories. That definitely deepens trust. And it certainly gives you information to make decisions from.
Yeah, I think the curiosity is so important. I think in order to be successful in anything, you have to have a level of curiosity. So you need to be curious in perspectives, understanding biases, really getting to that trust and building that credibility. But if you're not curious and you just walk in and out of a situation, there's no improvement going on. There's no, you're not growing at any level. So the curiosity piece is really important to your personal and your professional success.
And then you can take that information. So say you're a supervisor, or middle manager, which those are tough positions. And you're getting beat up by your staff on a particular issue. So if you can, it's so often we shut down like, well, that's what they said we have to do, so we're going to have to do it. Versus asking, I encourage people to ask those expansive questions to get more information, and then to present what they're learning to the people who made those decisions. It's really powerful. It's one thing to say everybody hates them. It's another thing to say, here's the problems my team is experiencing. And wow, that really gets people's attention. And so ask those questions and then take that information forward. That's leadership.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think you get two for the price of one. You get the what and the why, which is really important. You're not being left with, okay, this is the what, but now I still have all these other questions around that as to the why. So, as Kathy mentioned, when you can give both of those, that adds to your credibility.
That's a really good point. And I love that you mentioned the fact that that's leadership, because you don't have to have the title of a leader to be a leader. That's not the definition. It's anyone who has an influence on other people can be a leader. And this is very influential.
Yeah, it really impresses me when people who are, I'll say, at the point of service, they're delivering the care, they're in the trenches, when they take the time to frame something up so that those around them can better understand an issue. It's really powerful. That is leadership. And we need more of that. We need that from everyone, in the workplace, because there's so much going on and it's so complex. We're never going to understand it without those kinds of conversations.
Wow, that's so powerful.
Well, and that's when people really listen.
Yeah.
When you can provide them with complete information, they really do tune in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, quite often, they just hear it as, oh, it's just another complaint or someone saying something, negative, whatever it may have been. But if you can really frame it appropriately, people will listen, your credibility will grow, and they'll also be more inclined to have you on their teams for future projects because they know that you have that ability to kind of cut through it all and really give them the full story. So that's really important.
Yeah. And I would think that how you communicate that is important as well.
It really does.
It can't be, I'm sick of these gloves and here's the proof, put the piece of paper on the table. It has to be, I would think, on a professional level. Cost analysis always works well.
It will certainly help you move the issue along, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, this is really good information.
Although I do appreciate a good cost analysis, I have to say.
I was just thinking that, if they could prove that if they're, you're using 3 pairs of gloves for a procedure that you used to use 1 on, then that's going to raise some attention. Right. There's absolutely, no doubt about that.
Well, we actually did go back and look at the volume of gloves being used and could see very clearly that it had increased significantly. I don't remember the number, but we got there.
Wow, there you go. There you go.
I knew you would. I had no doubt.
Makes me think of those paper towels, in women's restrooms, or I'm assuming men's, where it spits out this much paper and you end up doing it 4 or 5 times. I'm thinking this is not helping. Right. It's not helping. I also I had a little giggle when you said open-ended questions, because every time I hear that, I think NCLEX. It was always the answer was always, how do you feel about that? That's when you knew you had the right answer. Of course, it's been a while since I wrote mine, so I'm just assuming
my
it's still the same way.
My favorite time of stupid questions, as I call them, is after a sports event where they're interviewing, say, the losing quarterback, and they say, how do you feel? I'm always waiting for that guy to slug the person.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Like, how do you think I feel? But anyway,
Exactly. Well, this is a really important topic, is trust. And I think sometimes leaders oftentimes aren't aware that their actions are affecting the trust level and their credibility. And that could be, giving short, curt answers to people, or not looking up. Could be talked about eye contact and listening in our last our last section of this podcast series, the first one, and how important it is to really pay attention. All of those little things lead to trust and credibility. Am I right on that?
Yeah,
they all tie in.
For sure. And I've said this before, but we need to remember, the higher you are in the organization, the more the information gets filtered on its way to you. So if you really believe it, know that and believe that, then you've got to find ways to get good information, because you're not. And nobody wants to, well, some people want to deliver bad news, but you're not going to hear the full story. And Bridget and I always talk about keeping it real. How do you keep it real as a leader and get real information? It's important to build trust.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's also good to really go down in many levels in the organizations. We often call that skip level meetings, but having those kinds of meetings, because people, at different levels will make sure that they're telling you the truth. And, and they love those opportunities because they believe you care. And so when you're in those kinds of conversations, that intentional listening is so important because they're going to tell you a lot.
Yeah.
And it won't be filtered.
No, that's a good point.
But you gotta, I kind of hold my breath in those, like, all right, hit me with your best shot.
Right. Exactly.
It's coming.
All right.
But yeah, that's a big piece of trust. So that's wow, what a great topic. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us again. We'll look forward to speaking with you in the next section of this podcast series when we'll come back and speak about risk. And thanks to everyone for listening. Please explore all of the other wonderful learning experiences on EliteLearning.com. There's so much to learn on here. And I'm Leanna McGuire for Elite Learning at Colibri Healthcare. We'll see you next time.
This podcast featured content from an accredited CE activity provided by Colibri Healthcare. Visit EliteLearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits. Take your learning to the next level by subscribing to more podcasts on compelling healthcare topics.